Whenever Samsung releases the Galaxy with an Exynos chipset, people get a bit nervous. To see if this year's Exynos 2600 is any good, I decided to compare it to the Galaxy S25 and Galaxy S24 in both Exynos and Snapdragon variants, and the result is going to be quite surprising. Galaxy S24 is 167 grams with a 4000 mAh battery. The S25 is slightly lighter at 162 grams with a 4000 mAh battery, and S26 is again back to 167 grams with a 4300 mAh battery. The screen of all three has the same peak brightness at 2600 nits, but the main difference is that the S26 is slightly larger at 6.3 inches instead of 6.2 inches on the other two variants, and it is a bit noticeable since the height of the phone is also more. The Galaxy S24 has two variants. Here, I have both the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and the Exynos 2400 variants. The S25 had only the Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset, and the S26 also has two variants, and here I'm using the Exynos 2600 version. The S24 series has a 4nm chipset, the S25 has a 3nm one, and the S26 has a 2nm chipset. But be aware, these are marketing terms and have nothing to do with the physical size of the gate of the chipset. To test the performance of the phones, I started by exporting a 4K video in CapCut, and as you can see, I'm also running the app that I wrote myself to measure the battery life, temperature, and other information. The first one to finish the export was the Galaxy S26, followed by the Galaxy S25 a few seconds after that. Then the Galaxy S24 Snapdragon finished third, followed by the Galaxy S24 Exynos variant. The S26 Exynos finished in 2 minutes and 3 seconds, the S25 finished in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, the S24 Snapdragon finished in 2 minutes and 26 seconds, and the S24 Exynos finished in 2 minutes and 47 seconds. The temperature when finishing the task for the S26 was 34.5 degrees Celsius, the S25 was 35.1 degrees Celsius, the S24 Snapdragon finished at 37.3 Celsius, and the S24 Exynos finished at 36.9 degrees Celsius. Then I ran Geekbench to test the performance of the CPU. Geekbench measures both single-core and multi-core performance of the chipset. For single-core, the Galaxy S26 Exynos gets first place, closely followed by the S25, and both S24s are close to each other. For multi-core, the S26 Exynos again wins, the S25 is close, and the S24 Exynos gets a better score than the S25 Snapdragon. Before starting the battery test, I should mention that I bought all four phones with my own money. The S24 phones are 2 years old, and the S25 is 1 year old, but they all have less than 20 charging cycles, and the batteries should be mostly intact, but probably not entirely. The S26 is new but already got the first update. The S26 is running on One UI 8.5 and the others on One UI 8. I put a 5G SIM card in each phone connected to the same 5G and Wi-Fi network, and I made sure they all ran the same brightness using a lux meter. The first test that I ran was YouTube Shorts on Wi-Fi. I ran it for an hour, and by the end of it, almost all of them had a similar temperature and similar battery percentage. Then I disconnected the phones from Wi-Fi, so they ran the next hour on 5G, playing through a YouTube Shorts playlist. Here too, all of them had a similar temperature of 32 degrees Celsius, which is around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The Galaxy S25 is making a couple of percentage lead over the other already, which is interesting. I continued on 5G for another hour, but this time played YouTube Live with comments popping up on the screen. Now, after 3 hours of screen on time, the S24 Exynos is at 62%, the S24 Snapdragon is at 65%, the S25 is at 68%, and the S26 Exynos is at 65% battery left. The temperature are also interesting. Both S24 phones are at similar temperatures, while S25 and S26 Exynos are a bit cooler, as you can see here. Then I connected all phones to talk to each other over Google Meet while still being connected to the same 5G network for another hour. By the end of it, the Galaxy S25 had the highest battery percentage with 45% battery left, while S24 Exynos had 37% left, which was the lowest. Many people may not know, but the software on One UI is not the only thing responsible for image processing. Each chipset has an image signal processing unit for pre-processing. Therefore, in this picture, you can see even though the camera system of the three phones is the same, the picture processing differs. The S26 is more vivid and brighter, while the S24 Snapdragon is the darkest and the other two phones are in between. In this 3x zoom picture, the sky color differs in all of them. And also, one thing I noticed often on the S26 Exynos is that the pictures are sometimes more exposed than they should be, resulting in loss of highlights. But most of the time, the difference between the phones and their pictures would be minimal, as you can see here. The same as this 3x zoom picture, yes, the S26 Exynos is more saturated and vivid, but overall, I wouldn't say any is obviously better than the other phones. I wish I would have made more photos, and as I thought my 2026 can't get any worse, I got into an accident yesterday and I can't walk for a few days, but subscribe and stay tuned. When I get my hands on the S26 Snapdragon, I'll do more camera comparisons. When I finished the camera test, I connected all phones back to Wi-Fi and took a 4K video for around an hour. By the end of it, the S24 Exynos was at 11%, the S24 Snapdragon was at 16%, the S25 at 19%, and surprisingly, the S26 Exynos had only 12% battery left. Then I started to play Aquarium WebGL in Chrome for a few minutes. For the final test, I let all phones play YouTube while connected to Wi-Fi to run the batteries to 0. And after 6 hours and 16 minutes of screen on time, the Galaxy S24 Exynos died. Generally, I do feel updates made the S24 Exynos a better phone, but it is still behind the Snapdragon version. I also want to reiterate that these S24 phones are 2 years old, but have less than 20 battery cycles. The second phone to leave the chat was the S24 Snapdragon version that died after 6 hours and 36 minutes of screen on time. The S26 held to the last 5%, but it eventually left the chat after 6 hours and 56 minutes. That means, surprisingly, the S25 is the winner of the battery test, which stayed in the chat for a bit more and finally died at 7 hours and 8 minutes. If you look at the chart, they are all more or less close in terms of battery life, but nevertheless, the Galaxy S25 is the first place, followed by the S26 Exynos variant. The S24 Snapdragon comes third, followed by the Galaxy S24 Exynos version. So let's summarize the findings. Generally, people are reluctant to get the Exynos variants because of historically lower efficiency, potential heating problems, and a standby battery drain. For the first point, it does seem the Exynos 2600 is not the most efficient chipset, and it's lost to the Galaxy S25. The heating part is mostly solved, whether by better chipset architecture and production, or by a bigger vapor chamber. The standby issue is also non-existent as far as I tested. You can see how I tested that part in my video comparison of Galaxy S26 versus the iPhone 17 Next. Thanks for tuning into Tecmo, and I will see you in the next one.